that PSBA is committed to diversity, inclusion, and equity work. As an organization based in Tacoma, Washington, we acknowledge the Puyallup tribe and invite you to visit the official website of the Puyallup and listen to their land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional homelands of the Puyallup tribe. The Puyallup people have lived on and stewarded these lands since the beginning of time and continue to do so today. We recognize that this land acknowledgement is one small step toward true allyship, and we commit to uplifting the voices, experiences, and histories of the Indigenous people of this land and beyond.
Thank you all for being able to join us today to hear Mare. And I think having an extra week to anticipate her presentation just makes it even all the better. Amanda Clark is unable to join us today, but many of you might not know that Amanda and Mare have a special relationship and are good friends. And I'd like to share a few comments that Amanda wrote. Mare Blocker is one very special guest and a longtime friend of the Clarks. Amanda's husband is also a professor at Whitworth College. Mare gave a wildly successful workshop at Whitworth about 10 years ago, and during that time created a work of art for my husband made from a frying pan, which included a pop-up doll holding a pizza. It's a long story. Maybe you'll be able to share a bit about that in your presentation. Of course, I got to know you, Mare, when we hosted your wonderful exhibit at Collins Library, Mare Made, in 2017. I can't believe it was that many years ago.
Yep.
And in sharing thoughts about that exhibit, you gave us a few personal comments that I'd like to share with the group. So I'm quoting you, Mare.
Okay.
In 1979, I made my first trip to the Special Collections Library at the University of Washington, which literally changed the pathway of my life. I realized that one form, the book, could encompass my interdisciplinary passions. This was my epiphany, and I have been a book artist since. I purchased my first printing press and founded the Kimberly Press in 1984. I've been a teacher, and teaching affords me the opportunity to print with my students while teaching them to print. Our exchanges have informed my work and added another layer to my interdisciplinary practice. And I love this part of your quote. I like to think of the lab as a contemporary medieval workshop. When everyone is working and the presses are running, there is a feeling of community that is magical. That's a beautiful quote. For those of you that might be unfamiliar with Mare's illustrious career and background, a little information here. She has her BFA in ceramic sculpture from the University of Washington and an MFA in 2D studio from the University of Idaho. She's a lifelong learner, as Amanda writes, believes in taking classes so that she remembers what it's like to be a student. She comes from a family of artists, makers, and crafters. Her early jobs included working with her grandfather, who had a few booths at the Seattle Center in the 60s and 70s, right after the World's Fair, and she spent a lot of time there with him and her grandmother. Amanda shared that her hugely varied works span a wide variety of styles and media. She's an amazing teacher and a heartfelt speaker. She has lectured several times in classes over the years and always wins students over with her candor. In addition to her art production, Mare is an avid gardener. She loves to walk her Dalmatian in the sun and work in the studio. Mare, thank you for joining us on this beautiful sunny day. The screen is yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Jane. Thanks, Amanda, from afar when you watch this recording. Okay, well, speaking of my grandparents, this is my living room, my corner studio, and there's a board right behind me, and this is a sample board of the work my grandparents used to do and my family used to make for them. This is a painting my grandfather did of my mom sitting on a log on the Tolt River. And I live in the same neighborhood that my mom grew up in, and my grandparents lived down the street. So yeah, they're still, I think you can see, like with all my little carved texts and stuff, that I didn't fall very far from this tree. Part of my job as a little kid was to cut stencils for my grandfather's silk screens, and there's a thin line between cutting stencils and cutting linoleum blocks. Okay. I'm gonna read a little bit, and then if you've heard me speak, I always have a script, but then I usually go off script. So I will do my best not to, let's see, where am I? Stop. Okay. Most of you know at least a little about me and my work. My work has almost always been autobiographical. I mostly wear my heart on my sleeve. In the last 4 years, I've lost 8 significant people in my life, including my husband and my mom within 9 months of each other, and my first husband and my brother last year. Each loss has taken a puzzle piece out of my picture plane, and I have struggled to figure out what has heart and meaning for me now. What has inspired me? What will inspire me? Where is all this anger coming from? What was the point of making art anyway? But I am blessed with loving, patient people in my life who have shown me grace and fostered spaces for me to return to myself in a happier way than I've been in years. I have never really painted much with watercolor. That was Buzz's thing. But when he died, I picked up his paints, hoping for comfort in the trace of his hand. My great niece, Stacy, would join me, and we'd paint together when we missed him. We used up all the blue. I bought more paint, more colors, and fell in love with the medium. I get his love for it now. Sometimes when you're creatively bereft, it's good to just make. It doesn't matter what you make, just make something. That's where I began with this work. During my mother's funeral, I spoke about learning chiaroscuro from her, how you don't know the light without the darkness. And I began this current body of work in the shadowlands of the gardens I love. My only rule is draw the edges of the shadows, and if they move, do your best. I then bring the outline drawings to my studio and paint them, for the most part, disregarding their original context. As a letterpress printer and book artist, my work has been precise and controlled. This has been a leap of faith for me, and I tried to paint each image without a preconceived vision of the outcome. You'll see how I contradict this in a few minutes. You can't change all your spots. This is the artist statement that I included in my show. And one of the things I tell my students is, don't worry about your artist statement right from the very beginning, because sometimes you don't know what it is you're doing while you're doing it. And that's been certainly true with this body of work for me. And honestly, I started working on this major body of work last June, and I still am trying to figure out exactly what it is that happened that I did. And I'll read a little bit of this, but this gives you an idea. The lower left corner is the style of drawing I do. I did this drawing in Bonaire, and I outline different shadows in different colors. I rotate the page as I do it, and then as I go back and paint in the outlines, I usually keep a certain color with that outline color. But I included this so people could see where they started. The CFAN is a page that I didn't really like the way the painting came out, so I experimented cutting it up and including it. So my statement for the show: draw the edges of the shadow, trust your heart, trust the drawing, do what it's telling you to do, draw what you see. I drew myself into existence, one shadow, one memory at a time, pulled at the edges of self that I knew to be strong and true. Maybe artists are hardest on themselves. We spend so much time in a state of critique, we sometimes forget the simple joy of a line. We forget how all the cadmiums sing together, how colors look different at 60 feet underwater, but they're still there. So Stacy and I were painting, and we used up all the blue, as I said. And I went to buy some new blue, and I realized I had been letting a 4-year-old paint with $125 watercolors. And so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna buy some more. And I ended up buying this bigger set and doing some tests. I started going back to keeping a sketchbook. I had dropped that practice for a while, and that was super good for me. I started writing stories about my lost loved ones and began to think of myself as a character in a story I was telling, and that really helped me. I found a note Buzz's mother had written to him, saying she had always tried to live a story that she'd like to read. And I adopted Maxine's motto and returned to keeping notebooks. This is a little story about my grandfather, who, as Jane said, was an artist. And they used to have a sign painting shop up there on Lake City Way, just across the street from me now. And he had a joke about somebody breaking into the store and stealing a quart of paint, a quart of vermilion, which, and then he would laugh, this whole laugh. And so we're really into puns, but we're also into storytelling. I joined Story Camp Disco in fall of 2022. Story Camp Disco community is a community of illustrators and writers, and they have been so good for me. And we meet on a regular basis, and I'm sort of, we're taking a little break right now, but anyway, I discovered Folktale Week because of them. And Folktale Week is an Instagram community of storytellers. Everyone works from the same 7 prompts. There's Deborah Stein hosts a workshop every fall of how to tell stories and how to get into stories. And I'm honestly contemplating getting a storytelling degree. Apparently there's a PhD at Harvard. We'll see what happens. I don't know. Maybe I don't need that. But anyway, these are little stories from my notebook. I'm repurposing old printed sheets from my studio and just stitching them together. This is another walk about my neighborhood, but it's also sort of my, there's repeating signifiers in my work all the time. I'm really into patterning. If you've taken a class from me, I have this little motto of when in doubt, pattern. So, and I'm really into these little honeycomb hexagon things. I'm into science things. I don't think I have a pointer here, but you can see there is a little green fill in of the honeycomb, and that's this ring I have. And it's a green onyx ring that I think of as my guide star. And I own I have it because I want to remind myself to keep an open heart, but I also remind myself that all hurts are healed in the great round. And I'm pointing this out because in this body of work, this pattern that repeats a lot, but you can also see in a lot of the work, I have like a little symbol of this ring in the paintings. And I still am keeping my sketchbook notebook thing, maybe not in this giant format. And I'm drawing rather than watercolor painting every day in them. Yeah, so I'm keeping that up. As I've been divesting estates from Buzz's estate, I dismantled our house in Idaho and sold that. And I dismantled my parents' house, and my family lives in that next door to me. I have been cataloging objects that have significant meaning to me, and what are my touchstones and the shadows of the memories they hold. And I'm going to turn this into a book. I found an arrowhead on the beach on our property in Idaho. I have that, but that is a character that reoccurs in a lot of the stories I've been telling, especially my Folktale Week stories. Exhibit D is Buzz's necklace that he made for himself and wore every day. Also during Story Camp Disco, we did a session on what it means to repair. And if you have followed my work for a while, you know that significant body of my work is on the topic of how do we repair the unrepairable. And as artists, what do we conceal? What do we reveal to our viewers? But also, how do we use art as a tool to mitigate traumatic things that happen to us? And that's what my MFA was in. So I have a bunch of wasp nests that I saved from our property in Idaho. And one of them didn't have the outside wrapper. And I decided to repair the wasp nest by making a sheath for it. And I used scraps of paper that had little bits of handwriting from my loved ones in. Because as I've been divesting these estates, it's like the little scraps of handwriting are the things that seem the most unbearable things for me to part with. And so I started watercoloring over them. So this is like a proof sheet from something I was working on. I took scraps of paper from my studio and mixed them in with the handwriting. And I repaired this wasp nest, but other people wrote letters to repair relationships. There's a book on, I'm so terrible with names, sorry. There's a book on mending that we all read together. And several people repaired like things that they had inherited from other people. So this was in my show. I made a lantern. I've made a couple lanterns now from, at a certain point, I didn't need the insides of the wasp nest anymore. I just needed the outside. And you can, in that, I'm going to go back. So I also was doing paintings of wasp nests in that lower right-hand corner. And so all of these things kind of inform each other, right? So there, in this piece, there are some cutout sections. You can see the repeating images from my sketchbook. This is a tree that it's in Discovery Park in Magnolia, and I call it the World Tree. I wrote a story for Folktale Week 2022 about this tree and my relationship with the tree. everyone uses the same 7 prompts, one a day for a week in November. And everyone writes a story or illustrates a story using those prompts. And the prompts for 2022 were fool, tree, star, rebel, costume, potion, and victory. And this is an old maple tree. Some people call it the grandmother tree. I and some friends, I've taken lots of my loved ones to this tree, and we walk around the tree 3 times. Why 3? Because that's how things happen in folk tales, also magic. And there's some like holes in the heart of the tree, and I tend to leave offerings in the tree, and that's what my story was about. This is the first panel from that Folktale Week story. I have done theater sets for Trial and Error Productions and Lauren Dudley's reimagining of Greek folktales. And the last one that I worked on, we did these 4-foot by 8-foot puppet stages, and how my sets came about were by 4-inch by 8-inch paper cuts that were then translated into these big plywood scrims by a sign company in Ballard. And so I have a series of these little paper cuts, and then I have made a bunch of new ones for different things, and I like to mix and match them and work on them, work through things in different layers. And so this one is about me and Ollie walking around the tree. This is one of the ones that, again, my ring shows, but it's also about descending into hell and rising again. That's the Greek story of it. But also this, that works into my work too. This is the page from Costume. I took some vellum and added some of those little scrap things and some other paper cuts, and I'm just layering different things and showing light through them. Again, this is a series of paper cuts. And this is the last one. I discovered, and I'm going to show you how these are made in a second. I discovered that if I layer a bed of on my work table, I put a bed of metallic origami paper and shine light down on it, it bounces back up onto these white paper cutouts. There's no color on these, they're all white on white. And I get these really fun things. In the PLU show, they were just white tunnel books, and I put up, I think, 3 of them. And then that was the last scene. Ollie and I are on the other side of the world tree. This is how they look in real life. This is my work table that I'm at all the time. They're little tiny things, and I'm just taking pictures of them sitting at this table. It seems like my nephew came over during Folktale Week, and he was like, wow, you're killing it. I want to see what you're doing. And then he was like, this is it. But I love that I love this tunnel book thing. I don't know why I haven't done tunnel books before, but I'm really into tunnel books right now. Also during the story camp disco, we had a personal projects segment, and I really want to be on the moth. And so I have been working on a series of short stories. I collect rocks, and I inherited rocks from my grandfather's studio, and I did this little series of zines. I debuted them last year for Ways Goose, and I'll have them again next week at Ways Goose too in Tacoma. But I inherited a box of rocks, and by box of rocks I mean I don't know, maybe half a ton of agates. And I carried them from Lake City to, in my suitcase down to Arizona, and then Buzz moved them back for me to Idaho. And then I thought they were lost and I ended up finding them. It's a little love story about Buzz and I. And there's some other stories too. It's a love story about my grandfather. Meredith McLeod is one of my besties, and she has this little group of community of women on Whidbey Island that I really admire, and they call themselves Art Camp. And they've invited me to several of their, they meet on a fairly regular basis on, 1 day a week, and they've invited me to join them. And last year was pivotal to me, for me, with Art Camp. It ended up just being Meredith and I, and we travel together frequently and do little art retreats, but last year's was really, really great for me. And I'm so grateful for Meredith in my life. And Meredith and I have been doing a series of online videos of art classes with Carla Sondheim. And we did the seated notebook project with Heinrich Drescher. And so my work of the shadow work really kind of comes out of that, the seated notebook thing. And I was going to make a seated notebook using Meredith's scraps last summer, and then I decided to take my seated notebook page outside and draw some shadows. And I had seen this as I have a under 10 person in my life who's significant to me. And I saw it on a web page about projects with children, and I decided to try it myself. There's some scraps of paper from my waiting room. I had to have a couple surgeries in the last few years for some tumors in my throat. And so I have a lot of these welcome to laboratory things for when I'm waiting for blood tests, and everything's benign, yay. Anyway, but I kept all those because I really want to have this welcome to laboratory blah 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 as a book title idea. I also have been divesting my mom's studio. My mom was an artist, and she kept a lot of these iron-on transfers for cross stitching. She was really crafty. And then also on that sheet is from my mom's stash of stuff. She also had a whole bunch of library cards from the Seattle Public Schools. And my mom and I both went to Jane Addams, and our family, all the kids in the neighborhood that are still my nieces, great nieces, they're going to Jane Addams too. So our family has deep roots in this neighborhood. That's where these started. And this is the process of how I drew all those paintings. I started out with the drawings on my knee. They're kind of hard to hold. I quickly figured out that if I put them on the pavement, that's a lot easier. And then I started painting them in. Like I said, if I paint all the green outlines with dark brown, then all the green outlines are dark brown, and I just start there and keep layering. I started cutting them up as this as the seated notebook idea, and then collaging and doing things on top of each other. I have been taking photographs of shadows and using those photographs in black and white as patterns for paper cuts for patterned paper. And this is that Welcome to Laboratory 185 piece that you see. I'm also continuing to repurpose some of those bits of paper from my studio and bits of paper that I just can't bear to throw out. And at a certain point, my friend Renata, who's one of my core support group people, so not support group, she's my soul sister. Renata asked me why I was cutting up the paintings, and I sort of was like, yeah, why am I cutting up the paintings? You know, sometimes book artists, we get so stuck into this book artist thing, like, you know, we are really Renaissance people. We're making paintings, we're making sculptures. Why can't we just make a sculpture or just make a painting? But anyway, so I made a drum leaf book out of that, that cut up. It was 2 paintings I cut up. This is, I'm really hot for the pattern on cantaloupes, and that's what this paper cut is. I mimic that pattern on cantaloupes all the time. I don't know what that's about yet. These are 2 of the paintings I did at Meredith's, and they were really, you know, I was going to cut them up and put them in a book, and then I was going to put them together as an accordion book. And I like the juxtaposition of these, and they ended up in the show just framed as paintings. At the same time, last summer, I ended up buying a really, really nice digital printer, and I've been playing around with scanning these paintings and then cutting up the digital prints and cutting up using stages of the paintings. I've been documenting them in stages and using those as bases for other paper cuts too. These are some bits from my sketchbook practices. I'm working out different ideas for my paintings in my sketchbooks, and I have started trading sketchbooks with some younger artists I know, and this one is from a sketchbook that Mackenzie Mayhem. She's one of the Monroe winners from PLU. Mackenzie and I started, we each have a notebook, a sketchbook, and we started mailing them back once a month, back and forth between each other. And it's hers are leaning more towards writing now. Mine are not writing so much, except that in some ways, you know, we're both asking questions of ourselves. We're both like struggling with some of the same identity things, you know, even if we're 40 years apart in age. And this project has been really great for me. And I also have been using it to work out design ideas in some of my paintings and my paper cuts. So that's what this is. These are from that sketchbook too. Again, my mom's iron-on transfers. The iron-on, you can see, you can't use too much heat or you scorch the paper, but that's not something I'm mad about. Also, I've been scribbling on sheets of paper and then using those as patterns, kind of as an asemic, however you say that, in calligraphy, where it looks like handwriting, but it's not really handwriting. I've been using those as like paper cut layers. And the middle image is a jelly print on dictionary page and one of my paintings, and Mackenzie made a few marks on this piece. And this is something I'm probably going to revisit. The piece on the right is how I'm stitching a lot of my sketchbooks together. I'm just taking pieces of paper and using a linked blanket stitch to join them. And then my paintings. So this one is entitled Entanglement. And Entanglement. And entanglement has so many layers of meaning, right? And I really have felt like entangled by a lot of things for a while, and I needed to like get myself out of it, right? Also overlapping all of this artwork is is a couple things. One, I'm a swimmer. I love the water, and I have a friend that lives part-time in Bonaire, and he invited me to come and visit. And so I took scuba diving lessons last year and worked on that, and that applies to this piece. But also I'm really into studying the human brain. Buzz was a competitive cyclist who had a concussive brain injury, and he donated his brain to the University of Washington. Well, he donated his whole body to the University of Washington for scientific research. They specifically kept part of his brain. And my mom died of Lewy body dementia, which is, if in case you might have heard of it from Robin Williams, it's part Parkinson's, part schizophrenia, and part Alzheimer's. Am I worried about that for myself? A little bit. And so what's one of the ways that you can mitigate how your body stores memory is learning new things. So partly why I've been learning new things and trying to keep my brain active, is to, keep my hippocampus healthy. And I'm working on a book about hippocampus. Hippocampus is also the name for seahorse. And there's 2 hippocampi in your head. And so I'm just like thrilled that I have 2 seahorses in my head. So that's what all of this is about. Also, this is a little process thing. I do a lot of walking. I take a lot of pictures. This is a piece about it's an allium in my yard. It's an eggplant. It's also about how I was trying to recreate those little water droplets. And I received a glass stylus from Buzz in 2000, and I had never used it. And it's also a reminder to me to don't save things, just use them. Yeah. And I use masking fluid. So this is a piece with masking fluid and layers of masking fluid, layers of paint, and then peeling the masking fluid off. This is a piece that I did in New Mexico. It started out as ornamental grass. I am including these other pieces to show you that, how things are like intertwined with my process. Part of this is fountain, part of it is Ristra, and I painted it outside in Albuquerque, and a woman told me it was forest fire, and I was like, well, it's not, but then she told me that the person who's looking at the thing, who's interpreting it, is the right person, which I was sort of like, okay, that is exactly what I want. I want people to read their own message into the thing. So that was a good reminder. Then these are 2 of the same plants. I drew these in Bonaire. The one on the left, they're both oleander. The one on the left, they were both painted sitting at a table with the same 4 people. The one on the left is them talking about lionfish fishing. And the one on the right, I think might be one of my favorite paintings. And it's just, in my mind, it's just me feeling contented. I also give myself little rules sometimes, and the piece on the left is me taking paint. The rule was what color paint was I going to use, and whatever paints had the most paint in the pans, those that's what I used. So Behold, Hooker Green, and transparent oxide. And I am in love with this transparent oxide. It's transparent umber oxide. I'm in love with it. And last week I was wearing this color, but I changed it up today. The middle piece is malachite. I love malachite. I wear malachite a lot. They say that you can't tell a lie when you wear malachite. And then the piece on the right is cells. I think a lot about cells. I think a lot about science. And specifically, I think a lot about cancer. My dad died of a bone marrow cancer. Buzz died of a bone marrow cancer, and my brother died of cancer. And so I think about cancer a lot, and this one specifically is about breast cancer. The piece on the left here is about, for me, I painted it during one of our pollution warnings last summer during the forest fires in Canada. The pieces, the other two pieces on this page were inspired by a trip I made to Crater Lake. It sounds like I'm not staying at home at all. And I guess that's part of what I've been doing to take care of myself. Self-care is just to start doing all the things I thought I would be doing with Buzz when I retired. And now I'm doing them with other people or by myself. And that reinvention feels really good. These are two other entanglement pieces, and again, when in doubt pattern. Sometimes sometimes they just get a little crazy, but I'm liking them too. So yeah. I'm not afraid of color, I guess. These are some of my travel paintings, and I just am drawing whenever I want to. I did a Rhodes Scholar trip to New Mexico last year, and we'd have these long rest stops at getting off the tour buses, and I just would draw some shadows at the rest stops and then paint them in my hotel rooms. I have a little travel kit set up for myself, and so there's some paintings here from San Francisco, some paintings from New Mexico, and then this painting on the right is from my trip to Bonaire in January. This is a painting, one of my latest paintings, and this is maybe one of the ones about Mare trying not to control the drawing, but then she is controlling the drawing. So if I don't have any I didn't have any preconceived notion of what this drawing was or painting was gonna look like at the end. But I did know that I have these two significant people in my life that that haven't met each other. And I wanted them to at least meet on a picture plane. And they have a lot in common. I spent in the last year a lot of time with them, and so I have a mashup of memories on this piece, and things that they share in common is this abundant wonder and sense of adventure and making new discoveries. And those are all things that I find myself, I get into a little pattern, and I find myself needing to remind myself of that. And they're both helpful for that. And they like to go outside and walk, and I like that too. So Stacy, my great niece, she's 9 now, but she sometimes will draw with me. We took a trip to Woodland Park Zoo. This is called Chinese Woodland Garden. And we drew these outlines of these big leaves. And I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with this. And Michael and I went to the Chinese garden in Portland in December. And so you can see this flower arrangement was inspiring for the painting and the rocks too. Also in my show at PLU, I revisited an older piece that has to do with time cards and shadows and memories. And this piece is the little details are things that have to do with my father. He was a big Johnny Cash fan. And so that middle one is about Johnny Cash and Johnny Cash's birthday in September. He was a Virgo. And this is a piece that I did. This was in the show. We found a ledger. I'm really into taking things from found objects and turning those into artist books. Detail. And then these are my folktale week from last year. It's a story about my garden and my dad and Stacy and my nephew Michael, and planting seeds, sunflower seeds in the garden, and me in the garden, and Stacy as me in the garden. And this is Stacy's the 4th generation working in our garden. Our garden is 30 by 150 feet. And people in the neighborhood know the garden. This is my little setup. All of these stories, the Folktale Week stories, are on my Instagram page, and I recorded my voice with each day of the story, so you can revisit those. But this is what the last one is.
I've already told you about the love letter your great-grandfather left for me in this garden. How he let me plant something exotic in the garden every summer. Peanuts, cantaloupes, sweet potatoes, things that don't grow in our summers. One year I grew watermelons. I had a tiny little 1-inch nub of a melon blossom the day before I went to camp for a week. I wrote my parents postcards every day from camp asking about my melon. And as soon as I got home, I ran into the garden to look for it. It was huge. We ate it right then and there. It was a hot day, but that melon was ice cold and juicy when he sliced into it with his pocket knife, the pocket knife I let you use earlier today.
And then I got back from Bonaire, and I decided to do one last piece for my show, even though I only had like 2 weeks before my show opened from coming back. And I did a piece based on my scuba diving adventures and misadventures and certification in Bonaire. And I set it up as a cleaning station, which is like a community of animals that help each other stay clean and eat the algae. And this is what it looked like in the PLU gallery. It's unbound, kind of an unbound carousel book in my mind. So all of these pieces interrelate for me. I work back and forth on the paper cutting and the painting. And yeah, that's my show. Thank you very much. I want to give a shout out to my extended family, including Michael, Emily, Stacy, Renata, Meredith, Eric, Lauren, and Michael. And if you want to revisit, all of my paintings are on Prestidigitation, and most of my work is also on Instagram. Thank you.
Mare, this
Yes.
is Jane. I'm not even quite sure how to react to everything you shared with us, because you truly are an inspiration. And early in your talk, you mentioned, was it your mother or grandmother that said that life should be a story you would like to read?
It was Buzz's mom.
Buzz, that's a beautiful quote, and you
Yep.
you embrace that.
Yeah.
it's just truly inspiring how you bring your family and your memories into your artwork. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Really amazing. And I know that many people are putting comments in the chat right now. We have a few moments for some questions, and maybe I'm just going to throw one out. I love the fact that you're working with Story Camp Disco, something that is new to me, and that you want to be on the Moth. Maybe for those that are not familiar, you might share what that is, and how, when will we hear you on the Moth?
Let's see, the Moth Radio Hour. Yeah, I'm a member of the Moth. The Moth Radio Hour is a storytelling group that it's on National Public Radio I think every week. There are Moth groups all over the world now, and they teach people how to tell stories. You have to tell a story. You go to a Moth event, you put your name in the hat, they draw out 10 people, each person gets 10 minutes. You have to, or 5 minutes, I think. You have to tell the story in that limited amount of time. It has to be a true story. And yeah, I started writing these I've always been a writer, but I started writing these stories thinking that I wanted to be on the Moth. And now I'm sort of not, I've gone to a lot of Moths, and I'm not sure that like I can do it, but I have I think I'm going to be able to do my own version of the Moth at BEMA next year. I'm scheduled for a show there, and a part of my artist talk, I'm just going to do the Moth thing, even maybe not tell the stories, but just read them.
We will wait in anticipation for that, for sure.
Yeah.
A couple of people have commented about your autobiographical references in your work, and I know that that's just been very important to you, and also brings you, I would imagine, some level of reflection and peace to deal with many of the.
Yeah.
And I love that you involve your niece in working with you. That's exciting to think that your influence will make a huge difference in her life.
Well, two things about that. One, I worked for my grandparents as a kid, and they modeled that, and I didn't even realize that what I was doing with Stacy was like repeating what my grandparents did with me, until honestly recently. You just like, oh yeah, that's what people do, is like work with little kids. But also it's kind of funny, like I gave her dad carving tools, and her dad worked on that some illustrations, carving linoleum blocks for me when he was about her age. That piece at the University of Washington on the on that pedestal, Raven Brings Light to the People, Michael carved some of the birds in that book. And so, she's like the second generation of my kids that have been working for me or working with me. And I just love, especially I love the message, I love Michael is like, he has this like competitive thing with his daughter sometimes about which one of us is more famous because of Annie Mare. And I'm just like, okay, whatever.
Something else occurred to me that we didn't mention, but in many of your Instagram and Facebook posts, you talk about the baking that you've done for the community. And I just want to acknowledge that is also so inspirational, how you're constantly giving back to the community.
Yeah, I was raised in a fairly religious family, and I believe in the beloved community. And while I'm not a practicing Christian, I do believe in the love your neighbor as yourself, and that being the most important thing that you can do.
Thank you. And just one last question. There was a reference to your tunnel books, and are they lit, or was that just your photography? And
Well,
do you do all of that by hand? No laser cutter, no, all with the X-Acto.
yeah, this is what I use. I have a padded X-Acto knife that, I keep it in, I keep it in an eraser. It's all done by hand. I'm exploring lighting them and trying to figure that out. I just got that rotating cake stand as a way to display the carousel book. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my tunnel books more. That's, they weren't that well lit at PLU, but I was not unhappy with them. So
They look great. And for those individuals that were unable to see your show at PLU, I know you mentioned everything is online, but do you anticipate that your work will be shown at another gallery, or will you include that in the BEMA show maybe?
a lot of that work will be in the BEMA show for sure. And Cynthia purchased that last carousel book for the collection. So that definitely will be in the show. And yeah, that's something to think about, the lighting for those too.
Right. Well, I think we're coming to the end of our hour. I want to give you a minute to look in the chat for all the compliments and kind comments individuals have made. And I want to thank everyone for joining us this fall and winter for our Zoom lunchtime conversations. We're going to be taking a break until next fall. If you have any ideas or suggestions, please feel free to email me, carlinjane@gmail.com, or Amanda. We'd love to have your suggestions, and we want to thank Mare for ending our series on such a positive and uplifting note. It's really remarkable.
Everyone.
So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Lynn, as well. And we'll be in touch.
Thanks.